Good morning, everyone. We're continuing our journey into the Festival of Light. So let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Give us courage and clarity, determination, willpower, joy, all the wonderful qualities that make it possible for us to persevere on the spiritual path. You have given us a destiny that will be fulfilled. We will find our way home to thy infinite spirit. Guide us and bless us and speed us along this journey. Om, peace. Amen. So where we are is the part of the festival that says, from sun and moon and all the stars, from glistening seas, high mountains, desert solitudes, and vast fruitful plains, and from the hearts of mankind and of creatures everywhere. So we go that far and we wonder, what are we talking about? Just we're sort of this vast expanse, and Swami actually instructs us as light bearers to hold our arms out and sort of create this feeling of the whole universe, from starting from the most distant stars and from the hearts of mankind and of all sentient beings, from creatures everywhere. So we've swept ourselves from galactic gases down to the little moths and lizards. And then Swami says, goes up in wordless yearning, a prayer for redemption. It's really, every time I do this in the festival, it's not like there's many parts of leading the festival that I always sort of just understand and I know what I'm doing. Every time I do this, when it is my turn to say this, I never quite feel that I have embodied the meaning of this portion. So I'm going to try just to explore for myself as well as for you exactly what this means. Okay, let's start with goes up in wordless yearning, a prayer for redemption. So let's start with what is a prayer for redemption. The word redemption is also, it's not a word that I would ever have used for myself. I think of it, as I was saying yesterday, as being associated with a narrow kind of Christianity in which we're sinners and we're redeemed by the death of Jesus, the sacrifice of Jesus, or the intercession of the Guru is how I would think about it. But the word redeemed, because I have understood ourselves to be inherently divine, so I don't buy into all of the we are sinners sort of point of view. That was what I was talking about yesterday. But the word redemption is also the right word because we're trapped in our own egoic limitation. We're just always ourselves. I think my past lives have included mental unbalance, just it because I have a certain understanding of how the mind can slip off its moorings. And whenever, and I think I've had what you would call existential mental imbalance. I've had several friends in my life who've gone through periods where they had a break from conventional reality. And in all cases, I felt that it was an existential break, which was that there was a certain amount of strain in striving towards spiritual perfection, and it just, the minds weren't strong enough to hold it. It was only temporary, thank goodness. But I remember talking to Swamiji about the friends, and there are quite a few, because Swamiji said, mental imbalance is an inevitable stage for every devotee. Now that's really something to listen to. I don't mean in every incarnation by any means. If you're perfectly sane now, it's not like you're going to lose your moorings tomorrow. But over many incarnations, and this is why Swami said, you get up to the edge of realizing what you're going to have to do on the spiritual path, and you just don't want to do it. You just look for another alternative and slip into a subconscious world, which is what mental imbalance is, because it's subconscious because you create it. You're the only one in there. Objective reality is to a degree shared with others. There's still a great deal of individual interpretation, but it's to a greater degree shared. Subconscious is entirely self-created. If your subconscious includes sleep, but you can also live subconsciously and have your eyes open and be awake. But the sleep state of subconscious demonstrates it more clearly because you can be sleeping in the same bed with someone, and you can be off in Alaska skiing on snow slopes. You can be in some blissful paradise. You can be in some nightmarish scene, and a person who's just inches away from you will have no relation to it because there's no shared objective reality in that. But when you wake up, you have a shared objective reality. So when people live subconsciously, they live in a self-declared world, and people do it to a large extent anyway. And sometimes then they project upon others motives that they don't have. They misperceive situations and they're certain that they're correct, and on like that. Or you go all the way to the reality where you're just living in your own world. And there's just no objective. There's no bridge with objective reality. I remember the movie, I think it's called A Beautiful Mind, about some brilliant mathematician who lost his mental balance. And there were three people that he saw all the time, and they talked to him and he related to them. But they were just a projection of his own imagination in some way. And as he gradually began to realize that these people were not what they seemed, and it was very interesting because he noticed that they never aged, and that every time he saw them, they were exactly the same. And he realized that there was something wrong with that. And then, at least according to the way they did the script, later on in his life, whenever he would meet a stranger, he would say to the people around him, "Do you see her? Can you talk to her? Can you talk to him?" And if they could, then he knew it was objective. But if they couldn't, he would push them away because he knew it was something he was making up. So having said all of that about this necessity to be redeemed, which is where I started on this, the inescapable fact of our individuality can actually really, even now, can make me very nervous, mentally very nervous. And I remember at the age of like 20, just standing looking out the window of my apartment in San Francisco. It was before I met Swami, just before I met him. And just realizing that if I just had to get up and go to work and then come home one more day without there being more meaning in it, I could easily lose my mind. And I thought of slipping into mental imbalance. It just occurred to me because it's been a solution that I tried in past lives. But standing there, I realized, I could just find life unbearable. I could slip into a subconscious world. Then they'd take me to a mental hospital and I'd go through lots of treatments and I'd have drugs and all these different things would happen. And it would be very tiring and very expensive. And then sooner or later, I would be standing at this window, looking out this window, and the same problem would still be in front of me, which is the unbearable pressure of individuality, the inescapable, unbearable pressure. I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone else, but it was vividly clear to me. And I just decided, because I've been there and I've done it, that mental unbalance solves nothing. And that's when Swami's, which I didn't hear till later, because this was before I met him, he said, no, that is, people have to explore every option other than actually facing into the necessity for God realization as the only solution to the problem of suffering and happiness. So that's one side of it, this prayer for redemption. And it's not, we can't figure out how to redeem ourselves, how to escape from this egoic concept of individuality. We can't figure that out with the ego. There has to be an influx of energy from another perspective. And when the devotee is ready, the guru comes. It's like we don't have to worry about finding our teacher. We just have to take advantage of every opportunity that's in front of us to advance ourselves spiritually. I became very profoundly from my heart connected to the great avatar Sri Ramakrishna. He lived in the 1800s in India. He died just before Yogananda was born. Before I met Swami Kriyananda, by the grace of God, I discovered his teachings, and he was helping me very deeply. I never took initiation. I never became a disciple. It never occurred to me. It never came up. But he was and is, just profoundly important in my heart and in my life. Then I meet Swami Kriyananda. Kriyananda is a disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda, whom I really did not know and had no particular connection with, but I had a profound connection with Swami Kriyananda. And I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I needed to go where he was and learn from him, period. As it happened, he was building this wonderful community in Nevada County, California, but really, if he'd been in an igloo in Antarctica, I would have gone to that place. I was going to go where he was, period. However, being part of Ananda entailed being a disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. I wasn't not a disciple, but I wasn't a disciple either. I just really didn't know. And I did have this profound connection with Ramakrishna, which was slightly contradictory. It wasn't that Ananda was so sectarian, but it was a focused ashram. But, and so of course I was kind of a little like, didn't quite know what to do. But I realized that I didn't know what to do because I didn't have a refined intuition that could speak to me on an issue so subtle. And so if, because I didn't have the refined intuition, and therefore I didn't know, I took no action, then how would I ever refine my intuition? So I decided to move with the part that I did know, which is I needed to go where Swami was. And I said to Ramakrishna, and then I said to Yogananda, you guys sort this out and let me know. And literally about a year later, I just woke up one morning and said, the way I belong to Swamiji, of course I belong to Master. And that was it. It was just resolved. But I knew if I hadn't dived into it, it would never have resolved itself. I knew redemption was necessary. I knew that I would never solve it on my own. Now, he uses the phrase wordless yearning because when I was a child, I was yearning for redemption. I could just tell that there was something about this world that wasn't really good for me. And I didn't have any idea until, I was 18 when the light began to dawn and 22 when I met Swami. But as a child, I just knew that it was screwy and that there had to be something else. And for a long time, I thought that my teachers and my parents all had some profound answer. And when I got old enough, they would give it to me. But when I began to get into my teens and just knew a little bit more about life, I realized that they didn't have an answer. That they were taking as the given the world as it was. Now that was terrifying. That was like super terrifying. That nobody knew. And I still didn't have the words for it, but this was the wordless yearning, which is there has to be a secret to happiness. There has to be a way to escape suffering. There has to be a meaning. I just knew that there was, but I couldn't even begin to find it until I found Ramakrishna's teachings, and then it was like instantaneous. Ah, this is it. This is what we're looking for. But the wordless yearning, in wordless yearning, a prayer for redemption, I lived it. And I'm by no means, I'm sure, am I the only one who did. Now, of course, because I have so many kindred spirits in my life, we all talk about this in one way or another. Now, in the festival here, Swami takes it all the way back, that all of creation is moving toward absorption in God. Every atom of creation, which is manifested by the infinite, is also moving. It has one purpose. In other words, this life has one purpose. This creation has one purpose. And we're talking about everything. All the sun and moons and stars and billions of galaxies, all of it is a song of divinity. All of it is a song of divine love, and all of it is guided by the divine, working in harmony for us to become free. And even the little creatures, the moths and the lizards, creatures, the phrase creatures always takes me down to very small things, but the tigers and the lions and the crocodiles, these are all stages of evolution in the jiva's journey. Jiva is this wonderful Sanskrit word, which means our unique aspect of spark of divinity. The English word soul doesn't quite cover it. Jiva is much more dynamic. Master says he personally remembers back to being the level of a diamond. And evolution through all the animal stages and so on is automatic. There's just an automatic flow of energy. And you, as I understand it, you just work through the karma, which is this is how you think of it. This is the way Swami put it perfectly. We manifest the body which is capable of expressing the level of consciousness we have achieved. So a moth has a certain life experience, and that's the limit of its consciousness. A seeing eye dog, a service dog, is still in a dog's body, but it's evolved enormously, and now it's incarnated still in an animal body, but with much more potential to express the level of consciousness that it's developed. And then finally, we are drawn by this inexorable divine force into a human body. But what happens when we get to be human is that we have free will. And prior to that time, evolution is automatic. Expansion of consciousness is automatic. And so we die and trade in our body, and we keep getting a more sophisticated body with a more sophisticated nervous system and a greater intelligence until we cross over into human. But at human, we can use our free will to choose our actions according to our perception of what causes happiness and what causes suffering. And then we can wander around for a really long time. But still, in the human heart and creatures everywhere is this wordless yearning for redemption, because we all want happiness, we all want suffering to end. And the only way we'll have eternal happiness and no suffering is when we escape from the confines of our individuality and realize ourselves as bubbles on the bosom of the infinite sea. So, as soon as we have spoken of how all of creation and all creatures have a wordless yearning for redemption, then we offer the prayer. And Swami has us stand up to affirm this. There's a minimum of movement, physical movement in the festival, but there's some. And this is an affirmation of our strength. And also by standing up together, it reminds us that this is a ritual that we're doing together. So then we say, O mighty source of all that is. And we articulate these words. This is a responsive prayer led by the light bearer. O mighty source of all that is, From sorrow, lead us to everlasting joy. From darkness, lead us to infinite light. From death, lead us to immortality. And so we're putting words on that wordless prayer of yearning and that prayer for redemption. And the redemption is, and we also say it, Almighty Source of all that is. It's not a sectarian prayer. It's this wordless yearning that all creatures are offering. Yes, this festival also celebrates the descent of this particular line of masters, but this is the prayer of wordless yearning, that all creatures and sun and moon and stars are all articulating by their very existence. We are manifested from the divine, but we all belong to the divine. Every atom dowered with individuality has this same longing to return. So the prayer of redemption, Almighty Source, where we come from, we're longing to return. That's also implied by mighty source, that the source of what? Source of myself. This is the Sanatana Dharma alternative to thinking that I'm a sinner. No, I'm not. I'm going back to my source. I'm going back to where I came from. So that is a profound and important philosophical affirmation, that when we make this prayer, who are we praying to? I'm praying to the source of my own consciousness. I mean, these are wonderful meditations just to reflect on, where did I come from? Who am I? How did I get here? You know, I spoke in the context of the baby picture I have from me of less than a year old. Where did I come from? How did I happen to be in that baby's body? Why that family? You know, the wonderful thing about Sanatana Dharma, this great teaching of self-realization, especially, I have to say, the way Master articulated it and then Swami has drawn it out. I can't always understand the answers in the sense of having the realization to perceive it. But there's never, I've never had a question, and this is not hyperbole, I really mean this. I mean a serious question, not just a foolish question, but I've never had a serious question, and I've never been asked a serious question in all my years of presenting these teachings that Swami didn't have an answer for. Sometimes I'm not certain exactly what that answer is, meaning I can't quite connect the dots, and when Swami was living, I could ask him. Now I ask some of my peers whose study and wisdom I know is greater than mine. But it's always there. There's always some way to intuit from what we do know, what we don't know, how it must come together. So, Almighty Source of all that is. And these are like, again, it's an answer to a very big conundrum, to pray to your own source. And then we ask just on absolutely, and this is what the prayer for redemption is. I want to go from sorrow, not merely to happiness, but the pair is from sorrow to everlasting joy. Now, of course, English is the only language I speak. And English, as I understand from Swami, has many more words than many other languages do. He says it's a wonderful language for writing and speaking because you have so many choices. And you have that word everlasting. And Swamiji put a great deal of attention to every word of this because he felt that the rhythm of the speech would help the concepts sink ever deeper into our subconscious mind, because the subconscious mind is passive. It merely takes what you've given it and then offers it back to you, sometimes reorganizing it in symbolic ways. But the more deeply the subconscious mind absorbs these truths, the more it becomes your ally in our attempt to move into the superconscious. Because when anything happens, it will hand up to us what we've programmed it to hand back. If we programmed program trauma, negativity, fear, discouragement, it will keep handing that back to us. If we program hope, if we program wisdom, if we program joy, then when the conscious mind begins to waffle, the subconscious will just hand you what we programmed it to handle. So, almighty source of all that is, let us move from sorrow, not merely to happiness, but to everlasting joy. So that once we move into that realm of bliss, it will be everlasting. Satchidananda, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss. From sorrow to everlasting joy. And this is, again, what we also have to build into our thinking. It's not that I want to be relieved a little. I want to move. My prayer is from sorrow to everlasting joy, from darkness to infinite light. You see, he puts an adjective on both of those. It's not enough from darkness to light. That would be the way to say it. Move me from darkness to light. No, from darkness to infinite light. And it's not only the meaning, it's also the rhythm. From darkness, lead us to infinite light. So it's the negative side is short, from sorrow. Lead us to everlasting joy. From darkness, lead us to infinite light. So that the where we're going stretches out in front of us, even in speech, even in rhythm. It's the small darkness, the infinite light, the small sorrow, the everlasting joy. So each time we say this, the energy is on where we're going. And the energy is on the redemption. This is the wordless yearning. From sorrow to everlasting joy, from darkness, lead us to infinite light, and then from death, lead us to immortality. And that's such a long word. You can't say anything beyond that. Immortality, there's no adjective you can put on immortality. It can't be everlasting, it can't be infinite. It just simply is. And death, meaning the dissolution and loss, which is how we perceive death, which is not really what death is, but that's how we perceive it. The opposite of that is that there's never any loss, that our consciousness endures forever, which it does. So when we're going from death to immortality, it's not like we're changed, because the soul, the Jiva, can never die, can never be destroyed. It can never disappear. The form in which it manifests, which is the physical bodies we live in, is constantly mutating, because the form is the material world and it's temporary. But the life force and the spark of divinity, it's never touched. Swami says to us many times, you are as old as God, because we were manifested from divinity. Our source is divinity. Our truth is divinity. But now we have to move from the thought of death to the realization of our immortality. Oh, beautiful, isn't it? Sorrow, everlasting joy. Darkness, infinite light. Death, immortality. And if we participate in this Festival of Light, either by reading it for yourself or listening to it online or attending an in-person service, and when it's time, please stand and repeat after me. And we repeat, O mighty source of all that is, from sorrow lead us to everlasting joy, from darkness lead us to infinite light, from death lead us to immortality. Om, peace. Amen. Isn't that glorious? God bless you.